Hey everybody, welcome back to the Third Circle YouTube channel. So first off, thank you for joining us. And secondly, please make sure you like, turn on notifications, and of course comment on these videos because part of the Third Circle is to engage in incredibly deep conversations regarding consciousness and more importantly, the transition from awareness to self-awareness to consciousness. 3 of the core things that every single human being should be undertaking during their lifetime. So today we're going to talk about a very controversial topic called police brutality and why we can see escalations of police violence through time engaging over and over and over. We're going to examine some of the key things that I believe are to be the true reason why, one, the escalation of force has become more and more common in police confrontation, and secondly, why we are seeing significantly higher levels of race-based, not only conversation, but violence across the board when it comes to policing in general. So I want to bring your attention to a couple of key components when it comes to talking about this, because I think that very often we get lost into narratives that were sold by the media, and we're not really understanding the depth of why or how have we gotten here to begin with. So there is a component that we must kind of understand as it pertains to giving someone power over someone else's life. And I think this is a key component that we're not talking about enough, right? There's two reasons. The first one is we need to examine specifically who we are, one, allowing to police, and then two, specifically in that very same segment, how their life is occurring and concurring at the very same time that they are policing. So what I'm trying to say is that, one, we are not taking enough time to psychologically understand the motives of those who want to police and what their intent is towards policing. Secondly, the piece that, again, we are completely lost on is the fact that we are not monitoring the quality of life of police officers as we go. I can basically guarantee that if you did a search on every single police officer that was actually in a situation where they used either excessive force or later were examined under some level of racial profiling for using that excessive force, they would most likely have a significant amount of internal drama within their day-to-day life, meaning there would be in a position where they are going to be very uncomfortable with their own fit within a society, which elevates their need to demonstrate their authority because they're not being heard. So this is no different than saying when you yell, you typically yell because the person you're talking to is not hearing what you're saying or isn't comprehending it. So you raise your voice in hopes that that person will then understand it, right? The same can be said about a police officer. When you're not being heard at home, maybe you have domestic issues, maybe you have issues with your wife, you're having monetary issues completely outside of the scope of what you do. The stress level at that very moment and your need to exercise a sense of control gets elevated significantly higher because you're losing control in your day-to-day life. And during that time, you're much more vulnerable to escalation to kind of end the problem and not have to carry it on or deal with it. So the thought process goes into ending a problem rather than actually creating a solution to a problem, which leads you to a confrontation. So a confrontation that occurs where a person does not immediately comply, does not immediately show calm, escalates within seconds from, hey, could I see your driver's license and registration, to, hey, get the fuck out of the car, to, hey, you're now not complying fast enough, I'm pulling my sidearm out, right? Those are the things you have to kind of understand about what occurs in the mind of someone. But then there's the second point that we're not really correlating here about what's happening in the military versus what's happening here at home on the domestic side. So in the military, when you're in the middle of a war, you get very tunnel vision and things start to change significantly in psychology of how soldiers start to look at every specific person as a possible target because you don't know who's intending to murder you, right? What ends up also happening is you gain a very different perspective on human life when you watch certain atrocities happen. In war, you might see, beheadings, you might see people cutting people's arms off. You might see things that the public is obviously not seeing, right? And the shadow of what you see, that amount of pain and that amount of disgust that occurs through that scenario is often associated with the perpetrator, which is of a certain race, of a certain background. And so what happens with the police is the very same thing that people aren't talking about. Police ends up in situation over time that gives you a very different viewpoint of how they view certain races and certain backgrounds. Is if you're always policing, for example, an area that's high on drugs and high on black people doing these drugs and creating the problems that you witness over time, you're going to have less and less and less and less care for that race of person that you're actually there to protect, because you're going to basically take everybody into one giant bag. And this form of psychology, when it comes to basically association, like guilty by association, is very dangerous. And there are ways we can truly fix that. One, we can ensure that the psychology tests at the beginning of joining the academy are much more severe. Two, we can ensure that we keep tabs and track of the lifestyle and how well police officers are living to ensure that those that are there to protect our communities actually like living in them. That would be a very important aspect of it. And to police the communities that people live in, not like way far from where they live, where they have no real pride in being part of that community, right? And then the other part that's important is to constantly shift police officers from one type of environment to another. And doing so allows some distance from the recognition of the constant and reinforcement of the constant trauma within the same grounds over and over. So if you have police officers that work one district that are very typical in that particular district and move them to another district and so on and so forth on an ongoing basis, not just on a you need to be reassigned because you don't get it or you've made a mistake. And I think this idea of continuous punishment for, like both for citizens that break the law and also for police officers that then therefore can't hold the law together because of the very same things, needs to kind of mold to a progressive design of better judgment. And I think, again, judgment comes back to, one, having perspective, which means perspective not driven in one line of sight and one line of work. So that's my 2 cents argument, again, from a lens of someone living in a third circle as to how we can fix just policing around the country. Don't forget, please read Third Circle Theory and Gate of Choice before it's too late. I'm telling you, this is important. And again, leave me your comments. This is a very sensitive topic. I would love to hear what your thoughts are on specifically how we solve this situation. Do you think that I have a good point here? Do you think that I'm wrong? Again, let's discuss it in the comments. Like, subscribe, and I'll catch you on the next episode.